everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Molitzis. I'm here with Carrie Eleveld, and today we're going to be talking about what else? Donald Trump. It is primary season, so and there's a lot of Trump news going on, Carrie. It is obviously Trump season. The Democrats have no real primary, so Joe Biden is the de facto nominee. So there's not a lot of drama going on there.
Right.
And Donald Trump is drama personified. So
we can celebrate the fact that Biden put that to bed last week in New Hampshire. I mean, there's not a real primary going on, but when his only challenger loses to him, gets 19% of the vote, and Biden walks away in a write-in campaign with like 63%. I don't know. Might be time to get out, Dean Phillips. Might just be time to drop it. So anyway, I mean,
And to be clear, New Hampshire was it's not a sanctioned Democratic primary because Iowa and New Hampshire no longer get first in the nation status with the Democrats. Thank God. It's a major upgrade in the primary calendar. But Dean Phillips, and if you don't know who that is, yes, there's really no reason you should know who he is. And Marianne Williamson thought that they could sort of sneak in. And even though it wasn't a sanctioned event, the fact that Joe Biden wasn't on the ballot, they thought maybe they could get a big number of the people who did show up. And then they could claim that there was really a contested primary. And there wasn't. Not even close. Not even close. On the other hand, Carrie, we talked last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about how Donald Trump's 51% performance in Iowa sort of hinted the Republican partisan base behind them. And we saw much of the same in New Hampshire last week, didn't we? Carrie, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Okay. Gosh, I was on a roll too. No, but you asked me about New Hampshire numbers, and I just never get tired of talking about the New Hampshire numbers because my favorite one is that of the 43% of voters that Nikki Haley won. Okay. And most of them were it's like 20, it's about a quarter. She won about a quarter of Republican identified voters. She won that in New Hampshire. She won the vast majority of undeclared voters. And then she won just a real small sliver of 5%, 6%, 7% of Democratic identified undeclared voters, right? People who were undeclared but sort of identify as Democrats. That's who they usually vote for. So the vast majority of her coalition was like a quarter of Republican voters, and then somewhere around 58-60% of or even maybe 2/3. Sorry, I'm doing the math now. 2/3 of undeclared voters. But the point is, and this is the big number, is that 94% of them said they would be dissatisfied if Trump won the nomination. 94%. That's virtually every one of them that voted for Haley. And she won 43% of the Republican primary. And it's worth mentioning that under the right conditions, New Hampshire is a purple swing state. I mean, under the right conditions,
It is. I don't think conditions wise, it is a purple swing state.
Except that if you look at the numbers under a Trump, he is gonna if this were to bear out in the general election, he would get trounced in New Hampshire based on the way the numbers played out. So anyway, yeah.
No, and to be fair, and I'll just to be fair, and so I don't want anybody thinking that Trump is about to lose 40% of the Republican vote. The primary turnout is smaller than the general election turnout, so there's probably a lot of Trump supporting conservatives that just barely have a bare tenuous connection to politics. A lot of them didn't vote before Trump showed up, and so they'll probably turn out. And even some people, just like there's some people who will vote for Joe Biden even though they don't particularly love him. A lot of these people will vote for Donald Trump, even though they don't love him. But here's the thing, Carrie, we don't need 40% to either not vote or turn out. We need 5%. You see that at a national basis, 5% sort of say like, the heck with this. This guy is a threat to democracy. We don't want anything to do with him. He offends me deeply. And it's not even a close election at that point.
Right.
That's the margin. So Trump doesn't have a lot of room to see his base erode, and it is eroding.
Right. And look, I'm going to say something that may be unpopular because there's nothing Democrats like to do more than play defense and approach every election with like a bare knuckle mentality of we're gonna lose, it's horrible, it's all over, right? So I'm not saying like yes, that can happen, and it happened to us in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. We really thought it looked good for her, and then it we don't need to revisit that, but it was obviously the beginning of this long national nightmare. Anyway, but there is a possibility, there is a world in which we all believe it's going to be an incredibly close election. We all work as if it's going to be an incredibly close election. There is a world in which Donald Trump really stumbles. And I'm not saying that Biden like just romps and completely, but there is a world in which Donald Trump like actually underperforms and does worse than most people are imagining he will do. So that's not a given, but there is a world where that's possible. There is a world like where Simon Rosenberg talks about, Democratic strategist Simon Rosenberg talks about getting to 55%, and maybe 55% is high, but what about 55%, 54%, 53%? Like, there's that world exists.
Yeah, and those percentages are sort of important. It doesn't seem like the difference between 51 and 55 does not seem like a big number, just generically. But in context, 51, right now we have a 51-49 country, 51% Democrat, 49% Republican. What that means is that even a small drop off in Democratic turnout is a problem for our side, which has historically been the challenge with the Democratic Party. We do pretty well in presidential year elections, not so well in midterms. That has flipped on its head. Because, in large part, because of Donald Trump. He's kept our base motivated, and our base is learning that it feels good to win those midterm elections, and it's important to win those Supreme Court elections and things like that. But here's the difference. 51-49, it's a 2-point spread between the two, right? 51-49. All you got to do, if you take the Democratic margin from 51% to 55, that's just 4 points. And Simon Rosenberg has done the math. It doesn't take a lot. It's just a question of turning out more young voters, more single women, turning out more Latinos. There's different ways to get there. A combination of them, you're only talking a couple points. That's 45% Republican. That's a 10-point spread. It means that we live in a world where Democratic performance can suffer a little bit. And it's okay because we got the big lead and then we still win elections. So that's the difference. And that's what we're going to be working towards. And it doesn't matter if Donald Trump stumbles or not. We all assume it's going to be a tough race because it is, and it's going to be existential. But even if he starts fading, we press the advantage because we need to take the Senate. We need to win Senate seats in Florida and Texas, which seem almost impossible on paper, but they are doable in certain scenarios, certain environments. We start winning those states. That probably means we held Ohio. Probably means we held Montana and Arizona. So it's imperative that we fight hard because, as we all know now, I think nobody listening to this is under the impression in so many games in town, and they are all so critically important. And the last piece, this is a very much an aside, Carrie. I almost hesitate to bring this up because it is a deviation from our main theme. But you did talk about how Democrats run fearful, right? We're always like paranoid, like we're going to lose. And there's a reason for that. It's because if we lose, what if Republicans, if they lose, what do they get? They get like subsidized healthcare, they get child tax credit, they get good things. They may not admit they get good things because their partisan mind will deny it. But nothing bad happens when a Democratic administration happens to real people. Right. Now, a Republican administration wins. We all know that, especially now, democracy is at stake. So the incentives are sort of perversely inverted, right? Like they don't have a lot to lose. We have everything to lose. They also have a lot to lose. They just don't realize it, right? We know
Right.
what's at stake. We
I
truly
tell you
at
what,
stake.
if there's enough reporting on the 10% tariffs that Donald Trump wants to impose on all imports to the country, if there's enough reporting on that, I think there's a lot of people who are going to realize they got a lot to lose. That
It's a
could
10% tax.
It's a 10% tax. It could cost, an average of American households on average could be $2,000 a year. But on top of that, this inflation that everybody's, like been really upset about over the past couple years, inflation would go through the roof with a 10% tariff like that on all imports. I mean, it would be crazy, and there would probably be a GDP slowdown too. And so, I mean, it is when he's talking about that. I mean, I know that there's a level at which that's popular. This sort of isolationist stance is popular, but if there's enough real report in the Republican Party, especially, right? It's sort of a nativist
Yeah,
stance.
it's
But
not. Yeah, sorry.
if there's enough reporting on this, the pool of gettable voters for Democrats that we talk about, they're going to understand that a 10% tariff is going to be a problem. Is going to be a real problem. So
Yeah, yeah. And I think just calling it a tax would probably be a good way to push that to fight
sure.
that off. But so anyway, so we have a situation where Trump is getting barely 50% of the vote. Nikki Haley is sticking around, and Trump is flipping out. And you've been covering this very, very closely. So take it from here. Like it is remarkable seeing how that race is shaping up right now.
I mean, Trump, of course, anyone who watched his New Hampshire quote unquote victory speech, just saw him come unraveled and say things like, I've just learned over time that you can't let someone go ahead and claim something when it's bullshit. Sorry for that unfamily
Yeah,
friendly
my ears are bleeding.
but right.
Can't believe
But
he did that.
and then he seethed. He was so upset that she wasn't dropping out and that she had gone out. This was smart. She had gone out before him and said, "You know what? I'm marching on. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going forward. South Carolina voters want a chance to vote." I mean, she got out there, and that is what ticked him off because she stole his thunder. That became the story that she stays in rather than, Trump won the second thing, has it all, his second state's got it all tied up, and then he just seethed and he looks so small and petty, like we
I don't.
all know he is.
Did he even thank the voters of New Hampshire? I think
Oh God, no.
he was
No.
singularly obsessed with his
Singularly.
slight.
And so this your question actually feeds perfectly into, I started watching her last week, and she's actually hit her stride in terms of messaging. I think she's got a better, crisper anti-Trump message now than she did for a year in the primary, right? And while she spent a lot of time attacking Joe Biden before now, she spends most of her time attacking Trump now. And she hits him on mental cognition. She hits him on, like, to your point, did he even thank the voters of New Hampshire? The Biden-Harris campaign, like their rapid response Twitter account, tweeted out an excerpt from her one of her South Carolina stump speeches where she was saying, in all of that, in everything that he said on New Hampshire primary night, did he even once talk about the voters? He didn't. He didn't once talk about the voters, right? So it becomes at that point where she's like virtually serving. Now, I'm not going to say, obviously everything she says, she's running in a Republican primary. She's going to say things that are anti-Biden that Democrats won't like, but she is as good a a Biden surrogate right now in the Republican primary as they could ask for. I mean, she is first of all reminding every woman voter out there why they can't stand Trump and why they would crawl across glass to make sure he doesn't win in 2020, because he's continually calling her bird brain. He's continually losing his mind over her. He's continually like making, taking racial swipes at her by using her, her given name, which has an Indian origin. He's played the birther card, right? As what it is, has Nikki Haley been, was she born here? Is she eligible to be, well, not was she born here, because she was, but is she eligible to be president? That type of stuff. And she's totally eligible, but this is just like the Obama thing. But his treatment of her, he can't seem to keep the women he hates in his life separate. And to be clear, the women he hates in his life, that's anyone who doesn't bow to him and do as they're told. And so he's mixing up Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi, because you know what? They all just meld in his mind as like women he can't stand.
So
And
literally, in speeches, he can't keep the name straight. So
no,
he
can't
confuses Pelosi and Nikki Haley. Just to be clear that you're not being hyperbolic here.
No.
Literally.
So, I mean, I think a lot of you by now have heard.
Because it sounds crazy. It sounds like, no.
I think a lot of you by now have heard that excerpt from the speech where he was talking about how Nikki Haley, he like said her name like 5-7 times during that entire thing, where he was talking about the Capitol on January 6th and Capitol security. And he was accusing Nikki Haley of not accepting the reinforcements that supposedly the White House was trying to send to the Capitol, which we know A, isn't true, and B, Nikki Haley wasn't at the Capitol because it was Nancy Pelosi who was at the Capitol, right?
And Pelosi doesn't have that power, just to be clear. But regardless.
Right. Yeah, no, it's all a big lie. But he couldn't keep Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi. He also, to Walter's point, Walter Einenkel, he's our producer. He wrote a piece where he used this. Trump had sent out this tweet on Truth Social that was like an amalgamation of Hillary Clinton and Nikki Haley. And so, you've got a Haley picture and then he superimposed like Hillary's face on it, suggesting that they're really just the same person. And I am convinced that because they are women who are not doing as they are told by Donald Trump, that they really all are the same person in his mind, that he can't really distinguish between them. And who gives a crap about them actually being very different, completely different people? And, who cares about their names, whatever. So whatever, I can't keep the names straight. Who cares? Blah. I mean, like that's.
And you see the same dynamic in the way he treats the judges in the cases.
Yes.
Because again, it's most of them are women.
Yes.
Of color.
Yeah.
Or not just the judges, but Fannie Willis in Georgia, the Fulton County DA, also a woman of color. And like it drives him crazy. Like he cannot.
Yeah, he can't handle it. And I think we're losing Marcos every once in a while. Yeah, he can't. Yeah. It's all right. He cannot stand it. I'm just gonna when you're talking, I'm gonna try to finish your sentences. It's gonna be a fun game. So if you break up, I'm gonna start to try and jump in and finish your sentences until you get back, and then I'll say, well, that's what Marcos said. But anyway, no, for reals. I mean, he can't keep it. And so I think on so many levels, Nikki Haley is really doing a huge favor to the Biden campaign. But her talking about, there should be, even though Joe Biden is also, and Donald Trump are peers in terms of their age, Biden's just been hit so much harder by the media that to have a Republican, candidate running against Trump, sort of neutralizing that argument by saying, wait a second, he can't even keep track of who I am. And, and pushing like a mental cognition test, I'm losing the word that I want to use, but anyways, like she's pushing this issue and she's pushing it more at Trump now than she is at Biden. And I think that's useful for the Biden campaign doesn't really need to take it up at the moment, and they may never take it up. They can just let Nikki Haley take it up.
And, you don't have to sort of back and forth over you got cognitive decline. No, you got cognitive decline. In this case, I think there's bipartisan agreement that, yes, Trump has cognitive decline. And it's real. It is real. He does not look the same as he did before. I mean, it's the airing of grievances. It's all nonsense. He confuses Pelosi with Nikki Haley. He confuses Obama with Joe Biden. It's just an absolute disaster mess of and we're starting to see, and Carrie, I hang out a lot in right-wing media, online media circles.
Hey, that's on you. That's on you.
And it is on me. But one thing I've noticed is that he's been showing up to these sessions late. People are leaving early. His strongest supporters are starting to feel disrespected. And it's just little cracks. It's little cracks. I'm not saying there's a mass, but if his tightest, most rabid supporters are starting to be like, yeah, it's not nice when he does that to us. And, oh, I don't feel like he's really speaking to us. Or why does he keep talking about that? Why didn't he thank New Hampshire voters? Like, these things are slipping in. And if they're feeling that way, you can just imagine how less rabid Republicans may be feeling. And we don't need to flip them. We just need them to stay home. Like, if we get enough of these 2-3% of those people stay home, another 2-3% flip, I think there's going to be Republicans that voted for Trump last time that are going to vote for Biden this time. And then again, that gets us to 55%. And then it's a whole different map. And we can breathe easy on election night. Hopefully we get some early results.
Place the one asterisk that we cannot forget about, which is the third party candidates and how much of a role they play, because they are probably the biggest potential spoilers of a are you feeling good about it? Please tell me if you're feeling good about it.
There's never been a spoiler candidate in the history of this country. It just does not happen. The closest we get to spoilers are libertarians in red state general elections, so places like Montana and Arizona.
I would argue that Jill Stein was a spoiler for Hillary Clinton in Michigan, and the 5% that she got in Michigan or whatever. I think it's the difference between, Hillary Clinton winning Michigan and losing Michigan for reals. I'm not kidding.
I don't think Michigan wasn't the turning point.
But it was it may not have been the turning point, but it's one of the blue walls that she lost. Yeah. So I mean, I am concerned about that.
And there's no, right now they're fragmented, and nobody at the time, the idea that Trump was going to win was sort of like fantastical.
Oh, so totally.
It was a free vote. People thought that they could lodge a protest vote against Hillary and it was safe and it wouldn't matter. Nobody is under that impression anymore. If the third party, if the different third party candidates, if they collectively get more than 1.5%, I'd be absolutely shocked. So it's not much of a fear for me. To me, it's just a question of turnout. If Trump can goose his numbers and people turn out, and that's what's scary, and that's what we can't take for granted. But Carrie, we've been talking about women that Trump hates.
He's cut out again.
I think so far on this cycle, there's been a lot of bizarre stories.
I know you cut out for a second. I know where you're headed.
I'm heading to Taylor Swift. And guys, Taylor Swift has become public enemy number one. Taylor Swift has become public enemy number one for the Republican Party and for the Trumpkins. And they have utterly lost their minds over her. And she got Time Woman of the Year, and they thought that it should have been Trump or something. And she has endorsed Democrats in the past. And I think what big part of it is they're terrified because last cycle she didn't endorse. She wrote a story, an Instagram story. They last for 24 hours, not even a grid story. An Instagram story that lasted 24 hours, registered something like 85,000 people. And she wasn't even trying that hard. So Republicans are Carrie's just picking up a picture of the magazine. And
Trump thought his picture was going to be right here. Isn't that true? Didn't Trump think he was going to be Time Person of the Year somehow when he didn't do a damn thing last year?
He didn't do a damn thing.
Yeah, but here's Taylor Swift. This is one of, I think there were 3 covers that they had for Time Person of the Year. Yes, I'm a mild Swiftie, and my wife got me this for Christmas. So it's
adorable. So Taylor Swift is the third most successful artist in history. Only the Beatles and Elvis have better numbers. And she, millions of young girls, Carrie, it's exactly the people that don't vote. These are the people that Democrats have the hardest time turning out. And here we have a icon that has shown in the past a willingness to engage in electoral politics, And Republicans are losing their minds over this, their minds. And to the point where they're planning to in one story, they were saying it was holy jihad against her to try to turn her into a cultural war item. Why?
What the heck?
Gary, if we had a similar person on the right, I'd be like, shh,
Yeah.
talk about them. Don't rile them up. Don't rile up their fans.
Right. Don't go
Be
after them.
quiet.
Yep.
And she'll do what she'll do, but it's okay. Instead, they are begging these Swifties to not just turn out and vote, but to engage actively in doing so. It is political malpractice. I don't understand it. It is freaking glorious. But even she's even being accused of being a Pentagon psychological operation.
Oh yeah, she's a psyop. Her relationship with Travis
it was
Kelce.
Miller. What's his face? What's his first name? Trump's Miller. The demagogue.
Is it
Not
Jason?
Rick Miller.
Jason Miller?
Oh my God. There's several Millers and I can't keep them straight.
Yeah, me too.
The horrible one. The Svengali. Trump Svengali. Stephen Miller. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so you think he's not like the craziest of them, but like Pentagon psyops.
No, but it's crazy. Like I think if they went even so far, and I haven't really followed this, but I think they went even so far as to say that this relationship that she's having with Kansas
Kelce.
City chief, tight end Travis Kelce, that's part of the whole thing. That it's a whole like military. I mean, it is like. Give it a rest. And I will say, so even like long before I was really much of a Taylor Swift fan, like there was that moment, and I'm guessing it was like a decade ago where she was supposed to be accepting some big award at at one of the big awards shows or whatever. And then do you remember this? Kanye West like got up and he was like, I'm gonna let you speak. I'm gonna let you speak. But he got up and made this whole like during her acceptance speech, like kind of bumped her out of the way and was talking about how great Beyonce's, video of the year was or something like that. And frankly, both Beyonce and Taylor Swift are doing quite well. But who hasn't really kept up is Kanye. So if you want to like, if you're like, you know what, we can do this better than Kanye did it. We'll do it better. No, you can't. No, you're not going to. Like it's nothing but a loser for Republicans. But they, clearly didn't get the message.
So I took a look at her tour schedule, and there is a very curious, like a 10-day block of rest period between around the Democratic convention in Chicago. So I'm really hoping, and a lot of their conspiracies said that she'll show up, and I hope that's a true one because it actually would fit in her schedule. I think she's in Indiana like the week before, and then she's in Chicago's the convention, and then there's time before the election, including a swing through Florida, which could be helpful if the Senate race is competitive. So I'm really hoping that she does fully engage. And if she does, Republicans have reason to be afraid. But again, they're not responding the proper way. The proper way isn't to try to demonize her and hate on her, because that just mobilizes and motivates her supporters to back her even more fervently.
But to your point, I remember you wrote back, I think in December, a piece about why she like presses all of their buttons because she is like everything that Republicans don't want women to be, which is like independent and whatever. And you went through, you can do this better than I can do it. And I'd be happy to have you. But I thought that was like, she just presses their buttons. They can't stand it. And just like Trump can't stand his buttons being pressed, so that's why they're coming after her, because they just can't stand it.
Yeah. She is.
Are you trying to pull it up right now?
Yeah. So my internet is gone to heck. Yeah.
It's not cooperating. Are you trying to pull up that piece?
My internet has gone to hell. So this is getting a little hard.
But
it's close to the.
Yeah, you're still in. Like, okay. I can still hear you.
it's close to the end of the show, so I'll just finish. You know, they accuse her of being unwed and promiscuous, right? They
Ooh.
oh, she's not married, she's promiscuous. She's really nothing suggests she's promiscuous. They accuse her of being it's just strong and independent and has her own ideas. And this is literally the worst thing that can happen to Republicans. So they're absolutely losing their minds. It's going to be a factor, and I actually think it would be fun to dedicate almost an entire episode at some point later in the year on her effects. I think it's going to be a big effect. So
Yeah,
um,
that'd be great. She's gonna hopefully she'll help register a bunch of young voters and hopefully they will. Hey, can I bring up something that is totally like I haven't tested this on you. I don't know what your reaction is going to be
okay.
and it's potentially divisive. So
Oh,
here we are. We're just going to ask. I'm just going to ask. Did you see
okay.
Nancy Pelosi bring up whether or not some of the she wanted the Defense Department to or maybe she wanted the Fed somehow to investigate whether some of the protesters at some of the anti-democratic, I mean they're protesting at Biden, pro-Palestinian protesters. Okay. Now,
Hmm.
I want to be clear. There are people who genuinely feel really strong about what's happening in Gaza, who feel really strongly about what's happening in Israel. I'm not taking sides. I thought it was fascinating because it does seem like, Russia's always looking for the way it can, it can get in there and sort of like, you know, create
Yeah.
havoc for Democrats. And she asked the feds to investigate whether Russia was sort of exploiting an opportunity. And I just don't, I mean, I have no feel for whether or not there's anything there.
I mean, there might be. I don't know what the investigation would much accomplish. Just like you see Russia really pushing Texas secession,
Mm,
se- secession, yeah, which
yeah.
is absolutely absurd. But it's clear that Texas Governor Greg Abbott is sort of talking about that, defying a Supreme Court order based on on the border. So Russia will use. I mean, I think it's there's no doubt that Russia and Hamas there's a link, there's a connection. Definitely, there's a big connection between Russia and Iran. And Iran is Hamas's biggest supporter. So there is that connection. Whether they're pushing it in social media, I just assume they are, but I'm not sure. There's not anything the FBI can really do about that. So it seems to me a little silly, to be honest. There are people that really feel passionate about the issue. They're going to be loud and they're going to be obnoxious, and that's democracy. I mean, this is just the reality of where we live, and they have a right to be loud and obnoxious. And
Oh, totally. Everybody,
right,
I mean,
so
everybody has a right to the extent that they can organize and interrupt a president to try to do it.
right.
So,
So I'm not sure an investigation is warranted. I think it's going to be one of the challenges that Biden's going to have in navigating those waters, and hopefully the war ends sooner rather than later. Uh, Peace talks seem to have been I sense a not sense I've seen an uptick in negotiations over a more substantive ceasefire. So hopefully that becomes an issue. And you understand people's attention span is short, right? So we'll be moving on to the next existential crisis after. And that's not to say that there's not a group of really committed pro-Palestinian protesters that are going to stick around. They're probably going to create a lot of big havoc at the Democratic convention. It's almost inevitable. It's going to happen. But it does mean that from a national attention perspective, that people I think have already begun to move on if they haven't already. And fact is, Trump is a very much an existential threat to our democracy, and that's what most people I think are really focused on.
yeah.
And that's
I
not
just
fertile ground for the pro-Palestinian crowd because they're trying to get traction and they're not. But
well,
it is what it is, right?
I just will say it is what it is. I just will say this. You can look at Civic's tracking of Joe Biden's approval numbers. Now, in terms of favorability rating, he's still 5 points above where Donald Trump is because
Hmm.
you can't. I mean, you can't do a job approval rating for Trump right now because the only
Doesn't
job
have a
he
job
has is losing his mind. He's doing great at that.
and
So
money
yeah,
and court cases.
and money and $83 in the hole. Anyway, but you can look at Biden's job approval rating and it has ticked down a couple points among Democrats and independents since the Hamas attack on Israel. So that is not in the immediacy after the immediate aftermath of that happening, the positions he's taken as the war has gone on, it's not helped him. But I would like to say this: it's become clearer and clearer too that you can't put too much money on what an approval rating is and what it means for the way people will turn out, because we in the last election cycle, especially the midterms, when everybody, all the Beltway naysayers were like, it's going to be a red wave because Joe Biden's approval rating is so low and blah, blah. Well, it turned out that was pretty much untethered to the results of the election. So, a presidential approval rating, it would be nice to have it up at least, above 40. It would make me breathe easier at night. But there's no evidence now these days in these times that holds a ton of sway over what actually happens in an election, because this isn't going to be about who likes Joe Biden or Donald Trump more. It's going to be about who fears Joe Biden or Donald Trump more.
Yeah, and one of them is scarier. And just as a reminder, Donald Trump's approval ratings were in the low 30s in 2020 when he almost won re-election. You flip 100,000 votes in 3 states and Donald Trump gets reelected. It was that close. So approval ratings have become a sort of a junk measure. Everybody, and it's also popular to say, I hate all politicians. So yeah, I disapprove all politicians. And it doesn't matter that, we have a record-breaking economic boom and inflation is back to almost zero, and all these great things that have happened.
Gas prices here in California under $4. I mean, I know for a lot of people that sounds crazy, but here that's a big deal.
Yeah. And so it is a different environment. That's why Donald Trump was just claiming credit for the high stock market a couple of days ago, or maybe it was yesterday, saying
all caps credit.
It's because my polls are high. That's why the stock market is doing well.
Let's just, and then I'll stop because I know you're going to take us out. But Let me just say this. His rationale for why it was his stock market and not Joe Biden's stock market that's surging to new highs is crazy. And he was saying that because the markets are already betting on him winning in November. I mean, this is a disparate pool of a ton of investors who are making minute to minute, second to second decisions about buying and selling, right? And he's like, 10 months from now in November, they're anticipating that I'm going to win. And that's why the stock market is surging. I mean, like, what?
It was nuts.
Crazy, but you know what? Rationale is that?
It also means he's paying attention and he's realizing he doesn't have much of an argument. There really is no argument for, and this is why they're trying to scuttle the border deal, because that's the one last thing that Trump thinks he can use is to scaremonger on the southern border. And here's the Democrats and Republicans on the verge of cutting a deal on border reforms and taking that issue off the table. Trump is flailing. He's got very little, and he's freaking the F out. And that's not even including the court cases, which we've alluded to tangentially, but that is very much front and center in Trump's mind right now. So it is gonna be an absolutely drama-filled next 3 months as the primaries shake out and the court cases shake out. Before we even get to the general election, that's going to be its own spectacle. So we'll be here. We'll be talking about them, covering them, and here on Daily Kos The Brief, also on Daily Kos proper. You can catch Carrie writing on the 2024 presidential election, as well as Walter, our producer. So thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Walter. Thanks, everybody that helps behind the scenes, Perry and Paul. And thank you, the viewer, listener, and reader, for everything that you're doing for our democracy. It is on the line, literally. I know we say this every cycle, but we're going to keep saying it until we drive a stake into the heart of MAGA. And hopefully this is the year that we finally end it all. So let's do it. Let's be focused and mindful and organized, because we're going to need all of it, not just to win the presidency, to keep the presidency, but also to take back the House and expand our margins in the Senate so that we can get rid of the filibuster. And then we get like cookies and cakes and DC statehood and all sorts of wonderful things. So let's do it. Thanks you, everybody. Love you all. See you all next week.